Meal planning and managing recipes can be kind of a hassle. I'm a pretty avid home cook and I really like to try out new recipes and things like that. But one of my least favorite parts of every week is the meal planning part of deciding what I eat, what I want to try, bringing up all the different recipes to get their ingredient lists and create a shopping list and all of that stuff. It really is just a pain point. But I was able to solve that pain point by starting to use a self-hosted application called Mealie. So Mealie is an easy to use and self-host application for managing recipes, creating shopping lists, and things like that. It has features to automatically convert recipes into Mealie based on URLs. It's got a cool little web scraping tool. It will help you plan out recipes, add recipe ingredients to grocery lists. It will even give you recipe suggestions of things that you might consider trying based on the ingredients that you have on hand. It's all really, really super cool. And on the self-hosted side of things, it even lets you do things like OIDC and has user and group management through what they call families and groups in Mealie. It's also super easy to set up and maintain. But I'm not here to pitch Mealie to you. If you're watching this video, I'm guessing you already know what Mealie is and just want to know how to set it up. So I'm going to split this video up into two parts. Part number one is I'm just going to give a very minimal setup of Mealie using Unraid. Mealie isn't exclusive to Unraid, but that's what I use, so that's what I'm going to show. The second part of the video is going to be about how to set up Authentik with Mealie so that you can use it for SSO, so that you and your users don't have to create a new account for another application. So let's just get right into the minimal setup for Mealie. So Mealie has two options for its database. It can either use SQLite or Postgresql. So SQLite is fine for most people. It's perfectly adequate. It's not quite as scalable. It doesn't get quite as large if you've got like hundreds and hundreds of recipes and things like that, in which case you need to switch to Postgres. For the sake of this video, I am going to go through the Postgres setup just as another step there. So to get things started, the first thing we're going to want to do before we deal with the Mealie container is get the Postgres container. So go over to the Apps tab in your Unraid and then search Postgres. We're going to grab a Postgres 17 instance and go ahead and hit install right there. It's going to pop up for me with an error saying, hey, one or more of the default ports is being used. You'll need to take a look at that. If that pops up for you, don't worry about it. We'll handle it here in a second. And then once we're in to the configuration page, what we're going to want to do is probably first rename it so that we know, hey, this Postgres instance is for Mealie, because I have different Postgres instances that are for different applications, and I just want to make sure that I know what this one is for. I'm going to call it Mealie test because I already have a Mealie one that is my production version of Mealie. So we're just going to call it test. And then here we've got the first thing that we might need to change depending on your setup. So if port 5432 is being used by any other container, it can't also be used by Mealie. So what I do to make sure that I am using a unique port is that I'll copy this, and then at the bottom there's this show Docker allocations, and this shows all of the ports of your different allocations. So I'm just going to do a control F search and see if 5432 pops up anywhere down here, and it sure does. It looks like 5433, 5434 does also. I think I have another one that's 5345. So we're just going to go 5436. Yep, so 5436 is open. So I'm just going to change it here to 5436. Next is where you want the data to be stored. So I usually just have it default to my app data. So I just leave it as the default. But again, because this Postgres instance is just for Mealie, I'm going to rename this last part of the path here is the folder. So I'm going to rename it to Postgresql 17 Mealie-test, just to make sure I don't accidentally override a different database or anything like that. And then you want to set a password, a user, and a database. I'm just going to set this as Mealie-test-password, Mealie-test-user, and then Mealie-test-db name. Fill those in with whatever you've got. If you've got a password manager or something like that, that generates passwords for you, awesome, go ahead and use that. If not, just fill it in with whatever you have. These are just placeholders for me. And then whenever you're done, just hit apply and then hit done. So now that we have Postgres installed, we're gonna wanna get Mealie now. You're gonna actually likely want to have your Postgres configuration open in another tab because that is what we will use. We will use some of that information when we're installing Mealie. So I'm just gonna keep this open in another tab and then go back to my Unraid and then apps. And then we're gonna search for Mealie. You wanna install this Mealie v1 that has the monthly spotlight on it. Your button will likely say install right there because I already have an instance of Mealie. I have to go actions and then install second instance. And then I get this port warning again, but we're just gonna go ahead and hit OK and then jump right into the configuration. So again, first thing I'm gonna do is rename this Mealie v1-test. And then we're gonna pop down here to the port. So I'm gonna copy this port 3000, do the show Docker allocations, Control F, Control V, to find, yep, I already have 3000 in use. I believe I have several 3000s and some things. I usually just increment like 3002, 3003. I think I've got it all the way up until 6. So yeah, 3006 is open. So I'm just gonna use port 3006 right here. And then app data, this is where Mealie is going to configure all of its settings for all of its configuration settings. So I usually just leave it in app data, but I'm gonna rename my folder to -test so I don't overwrite my normal Mealie container. And then next we have allow setup. So I'm gonna leave this as false. What allow setup means is that if there is a user who doesn't have a Mealie account and they get into your Mealie instance via whatever the URL or however else, if they access your Mealie, they have the option to sign up as a user in Mealie. I don't want random people that I don't know about accessing and creating accounts on my Mealie instance, so I leave this set to false. If you need that changed, go ahead and set it to true. Next up is a bunch of email stuff. So all this SMTP and email stuff is for password resetting in Mealie. So if you forget your password, it can use all of this email configuration to send you reset information. If you are not concerned about having the ability to reset passwords, or you're using password resets through Authentik instead, these sections, so the SMTP from email through SMTP port, you can just leave them as defaults. They do not need to be properly configured. If you do need that functionality, then you'll have to go through these steps based on what your email is. So the default email is whatever your email address is, and then the SMTP from email is the email that the password reset will come from. So if a user says, I need to reset my password, it's the email address that is associated with the email that contains that information. SMTP host is whatever email provider you're using. So if you're using Gmail, it's smtp.gmail.com. If you're using Outlook, it's gonna look different. If you're looking Proton, it's gonna look different. If you're self-hosting your own email server, it's gonna look different. Just set it to whatever your email provider's SMTP host is. You can find that information through just a quick Google search. And then SMTP user is just going to be your email that you want associated with the whatever your SMTP provider is. And then the SMTP password. So this one can be a little bit more tricky. I'm not going to walk through how to get this because it's not necessary for Mealie functionality. But if you do need this password reset functionality, then you'll need to log into the account settings of whoever your email provider is and basically create the SMTP password for an app. There are some guides online that, again, you can find through a quick Google search. I'll even leave 1 or 2 links down below in case you need to. And then again, with this SMTP port, that's just something you're going to have to look up based off of your SMTP provider. Again, I'm not going to run through this because it can vary a lot depending on who your email provider is. So I'm just going to leave these as blanks since they're not strictly necessary to get Mealie working. They're only necessary for password recovery. Next is this base URL. So the base URL is if you're using a reverse proxy, it is the base domain of where your Mealie is going to be. So here it has the example mealie.mydomain.net. If you're using reverse proxy, Cloudflare Tunnel, Pangolin Tunnel, whatever it is, you'll want to put your URL here. If you're not using that, you can also safely ignore that. Since I'm not setting up a whole reverse proxy in this video, I'm just going to leave it at the default value. Next, you're going to want to hit the Show More Settings button and then go down to the DB engine. So if you are running Mealie in SQLite mode, using SQLite as the database, you can just leave everything how it is from this point on, go all the way down and then hit apply. Since I'm walking through how to set it up with Postgres, we're going to change this value from SQLite to Postgres. And then here is all of the Postgres information for the instance that we just set up, which is why I recommended that we kept a tab open with that same information just so we can copy and paste it right over. So I'm going to take my Postgres port and put it in the Postgres port slot. And I'm just going to do that with all of the other values here really quick. And then the last thing that you'll need to configure is the IP address of the port. So I know that mine is 192.168-0-246. If you don't know what that is, then you can find it here in the Docker tab under the LAN IP. So it is this part right here. So once we have that all configured, then we can hit apply, wait for the container to do its thing, and then hit done. And boom, we've got Mealie. So if we go back over to Docker, we can click on this icon and go to the web UI. And this walks you through the initial setup for your Mealie instance. So go ahead and go through that with all of the settings that you need and configure how you would like. And then you'll be good to go. That's kind of the just getting Mealie up and running quickly. So you should be able to add recipes, you'll be able to scrape recipes and everything like that. Next, I'm going to get into setting up Authentik and Mealie so that we can use Authentik for logins. If you don't know what all of that means, it's just kind of a advanced / streamlined way of managing users across multiple apps. It's kind of like using login with Google, but you get to self-host it. It's just a service called Authentik. If you do know what it's about, then we're gonna dive right into setting that up. As a note, both Authentik and Mealie do have documentation on configuring OIDC. And for this part of the video, I'm essentially going to create a video guide based off of the Authentik guide that they have here. I'll leave both of those resources linked down below. You'll see me copy and pasting some things here and there, and all of those things and additional information can be found in this guide, which again is going to be linked in the description. So the first thing that you're going to want to do is go into the admin interface of your Authentik instance, and then you'll want to go over here to applications and applications. So in Authentik, you need both applications and providers. And one of the easiest ways to set those up is by going to applications and then creating an application with provider right here. So first thing you got to do is name it. I'm going to do Mealie test because again, I have a production version of Mealie. Then once that's named, go ahead and hit next. Then we're going to choose this OAuth2 / OpenID provider. And then we are going to configure the provider settings here. The authorization flow can either be explicit or implicit. An explicit authorization flow, after a user logs in with Authentik, it will have a pop-up screen that says, are you sure that you're okay sharing this information with Mealie? Implicit consent just takes that information and skips the step of showing it to the users. Since my users are predominantly family members who are okay with it, I just use implicit consent to take out just one part of the process and a point of friction for them. After you choose your authentication flow, we're going to see our client ID and client secret down here. We're going to need those later, but we'll get to that here in a second. Next, we've got the redirect URIs. So we're going to want to create 2 of these, and I'm going to copy and paste them from the documentation. Again, that's linked below. The first one is going to be https://mealie.company/login, where mealie.company is whatever the URL of your Mealie instance is. So if you have like mealie.yourdomain.net or whatever it is, you'll want to set those up there. That's if you're using a Cloudflare tunnel, Pangolin, or reverse proxy, something like that. If you aren't exposing this to the internet and for some reason still want to use Authentik, then you're going to want to also add these ones that are HTTP, and then that is just the IP address and the port of your Mealie instance. So it is just the HTTPS and then IP address and port is how it's accessed. So instead of the mealie.company, you're just going to want to fill that information in there. Since I'm not going through the reverse proxy setup, I'm going to just add my IP address and port there. Again, if you don't know what those are, they are in, you can find them easily this LAN IP port in the Docker tab of Unraid. After you've set those redirect URIs, you can hit next and then configure bindings. I'm not going to dive into configuring bindings here. That's a little out of scope of the video. So I'm going to go ahead and just hit next and then submit. So now my application and my provider have been created. That's step 1 in Authentik. Step 2 is we've got to create some user groups. The way that we do that is we go down to directory and then groups. And you'll want to make sure to create a Mealie admins and a Mealie user group. So I set these up earlier when I was testing something, but it's really easy to create a group. Just hit the create button, name it whatever you'd like, and then go ahead and hit create down there at the bottom. Once you have your groups created, what you're gonna do is click into those groups, go to users, and then either add existing users that already exist in Authentik or create new users to be a part of these roles. For general Mealie usage, they can just go into the Mealie users group. If they are an administrator and have permissions to administrate Mealie, then they need to be in both the Mealie admins and Mealie user groups. So just keep that in mind when you're making groups, that admins need to be in both, but users will just be in the user group. So that's it for the Authentik side of this configuration, but we're going to leave Authentik open because we're going to snag some information from here later. Just to make it easier, I'm going to go back to providers and then this Mealie test provider because we're going to use some of this information here momentarily. Now we'll go back to Docker, and to configure the Mealie end of the spectrum, we're going to just click the hyperlinked text, and then we're going to get back into the configuration of Mealie. And this involves creating a few new variables. So if you scroll all the way down to the bottom, we see that there's this add another path, port, variable, label, or device. We're going to be using that button a bunch here to add additional variables to our Mealie container. So again, I'm copy and pasting these variables from the Authentik documentation over into the Mealie configuration here, and I'll explain what each of them means as they go on, but don't be concerned that you don't know where these are coming from. It's all just linked in the description. So the first thing that we're going to do, we're going to create a new variable. Make sure that this up here is set to variable. And the first one that we're going to create is the OIDC auth enabled. And you want to put the name of the variable in both the name and key slots. And then we're going to take the value true and put them in the value and default value slots. What OIDC auth enabled does, if it's set to true, it lets Mealie know that it is going to be using OIDC. If it's set to false, it lets Mealie know that it's not going to be doing it. Obviously, since we're configuring it, we're going to set it to true. The next one we're going to create is going to be called OIDC provider name. So this one, we're going to set the value to Authentik. It basically tells Mealie, hey, we're using OIDC and it is Authentik. Next, we're going to create yet another variable, and it's going to be called OIDC configuration URL. So this is where we're going to have to pop back over into Authentik to get some information. So if you're in your provider in Authentik, on the right-hand side, you'll see this OpenID configuration URL. You'll want to copy that and come over and paste it in the value and default value slots. That just makes it really easy to pull over that information. The next thing that we're going to add is the OIDC client ID. So again, we're going to pop over to Authentik and grab this client ID right here. Just copy and paste. And then the next one we're going to do is the OIDC client secret. Sorry, yeah, the OIDC client secret. We get that by going, again, we're back here in Authentik in our provider, and we're going to hit edit. And then this client secret is not visible right now, but just click this little eyeball. And then we're going to copy and paste that over here. Make sure this is set to variable. And then we're going to hit add. The next one that we're going to add is this OIDC sign up enabled. And we're going to set that value equal to true. This basically means that if you have an Authentik user that accesses Mealie, but they don't have a Mealie user, this will automatically enroll Authentik users in Mealie without causing any friction. Next up, we've got our OIDC user group. So another variable here, OIDC user group. So this is the name of the group that you made in Authentik that is for users. In my case, it's Mealie-test-user. Make sure there's no leading white spaces there. They came over when I copied it. And then add, and then I'll give $1 million to whoever guesses that the next one that we're going to add is the admin group name. And we're just going to pop over here, and it's Mealie-test-admins in my case. But for whatever you set them to, you'll want to bring in those exact names. And then when you're done, add. And then we've got two optional ones coming up here, and I think they're worth doing. They're super easy. So we're going to add the OIDC auto redirect. So this means that once you get into the login page of Mealie, it's automatically going to redirect users to use Authentik instead of the Mealie built-in authentication. So it just removes a point of friction that makes it a little bit easier for users. If you don't want that, there will just be a continue with Authentik button that users will have to click. I just like the auto redirect because it's a little bit more seamless. And then the last thing that we're going to add is OIDC remember me. Setting this to true will allow Mealie to use cookies to keep login instances so that not every time a user accesses Mealie will they have to log into it. It will kind of cache it like other sites do. Once all of that is configured, go ahead and hit apply. And Mealie will do its thing, Unraid will do its thing, and then when you're done, go ahead and hit done. So if you're able to configure everything correctly and get into your Mealie web UI, you can hit this login in the top right, and it will automatically redirect you to use Authentik for your login, and then log in with whatever user you're using for testing and just make sure that everything works. Hopefully you've been able to get to this point. So that's a wrap on setting up Mealie in Unraid and then connecting it to Authentik for OIDC verification and login. I hope you found this video interesting and helpful and that you're able to get everything set up. If you did find it interesting or helpful, please also consider subscribing for more content like this and then leaving a link on the video. And in the comments down below, share with me the ways that you're using Mealie or if there was any part of this setup that was a little bit confusing or difficult for you. As always, I'll see you guys in the next one. Ciao.